We're going to move straight along. So Grace Hosking from the Northwest Node Birchip Cropping Group is going to talk about the Young Farmers Network. So welcome, Grace. Thank you.
There we go. Hopefully you can hear me. Good morning, everyone. As David said, Grace Hosking. So I've been leading the Northwest Node of the Big Hub. So the Birchip Cropping Group leads sort of across the Wimmera Mallee region. Today, I'll be talking to you about the BCG Young Farmer Network, which was one of the key initiatives out of the hub, and just, I guess, in general, how it's really fostered drought resilience in Northwest Victoria. So essentially, the concept originated from the consultation process undertaken through the hub. And through that process, it was really highlighted that young farmers in our region are facing really specific and unique challenges, particularly when it comes with dealing with adverse conditions, so drought. And from there, it became evident that there was significant need for a support network tailored to the needs of these young farmers. I guess we face a bit of a phenomenon in our region where probably around the age of 18, when people finish school, they head away and they might complete a trade or a tertiary education of some kind, and they bring back these really diverse skills to the farm, which are really beneficial to the business. It might be accounting, marketing, building. However, often they lack the key agronomic training, which is really essential to effective farming practices. There's also, it was noted that young farmers are returning at different ages, and so there's a notable gap in professional support mechanisms that can kind of leave these growers without the necessary resources and guidance to navigate challenging periods such as drought. And we know that addressing these challenges is really crucial for the sustainability and resilience of farming in the Northwest region. So essentially, the primary goal of the Young Farmer Network is, as it says there, to create a really robust support network for young farmers. It aims to enhance drought resilience by fostering a strong community, and we want farmers to build both the technical skills and the emotional resilience needed to thrive in adverse conditions. So we officially launched the Young Farmer Network in 2022. And look, previously in 2017, BCG ran a similar program. It was called the GAP program, Growth, Adoption, Profitability and Production. And it was supported by state government funding at the time. So through that project, 95% of respondents stated that they learnt new information because of the project, and 58% stated that it improved the potential of their farm to be more productive or profitable. So that kind of reinforced that there was real merit in this concept. Look, the target audience for us is the youngest generation actively involved on farm. Now, we went back and forth about whether there should be an age, but I think the really great thing about the Young Farm Network is that we can have 19-year-olds and 39-year-olds in the room, despite there being a 20-year age gap. They're at a really similar stage in their farming career. And yeah, look, the focus has always been on sharing ideas, business practices, and drought strategies. And a really key success factor is the fact that it's responsive and farmer-driven. Now, it has quite the geographic reach across kind of the Wimmera Southern Mallee. We've got 5 groups at present with the potential of establishing a few more. At the moment, they're kind of based roughly around local government areas, just because this allows us to be really localised in the way that we connect with the growers. So you can see there's Bullock, Quambatook, Loddon, Yarriambiack, Hindmarsh and West Wimmera. Now, when we thought about what we wanted to achieve through this project, there was kind of 3 key components that we wanted to focus on. They all came back to educational and networking. So we've got the professional networking aspect. And as an example of that, last year it was identified through some consultations with local growers that they wanted more support around farm expansion decisions. Land prices in the last few years have really skyrocketed like they have in most places. And farmers felt there was a lot of risk associated with purchase or leasing in that current market, or maybe they just needed more support around guiding those objective expansion decisions. So we got a whole heap of industry professionals into one room. We had a whole day focused on all the elements of farm expansion. And then the other, I guess, benefit of that is that we had lots of growers able to network with these industry experts and with each other. Another key aspect is the educational workshops. So we just cover various topics relevant to farmers, and this is where that timely and topical aspect that Cam spoke about previously is really important. We want it to be farmer driven, so we want it to be focused on what farmers want at the time. As an example, following our wet spring and summer in 2022, in March of last year, we engaged Cassie Schaaf, soil scientist, to help farmers discuss wet soils and how to, I guess, support the waterlogged soils. So they went out into the field, into a local grower's paddock. They were able to look at waterlogged soils and compare them to non-waterlogged soils, interpret some soil tests, and really help them guide decision-making in that area. The third aspect is our social events. So this is just designed to really build that community and provide that support system. So most recently, we had a Young Farmer Network Ball, and that saw 300 young farmers come to Bridgewater to network and also just to celebrate the contributions of those young people to the industry. Now I've got a video. I don't know if it'll play. So sorry, it was a little blurry, but you get the idea. There's a really diverse range of people that attend these events, and the events themselves are really diverse. So that's just an example of some of the other activities that we do throughout the year. Now that's all, but happy to answer any questions later. It's a project that we're really proud of at BCG, and we're really grateful for the Vic Hub support in making it happen. Thank you.
Fantastic, and you saved a few minutes, so that's even better. We do have a Q&A at the end of this session, so save your questions up. We've got about 15 or so minutes to ask questions at the back end, and of course, we flow into lunch, and just watching your video there made me think about lunch with those beautiful counter meals. The next presentation is from Alina Saeed, who is from the Northwest Irrigated Horticultural Node Mallee Regional Innovation Centre, who's going to talk about consultation as process, lessons learned from blue-green algae water forecasting project. So welcome, Alina. Thank you. Set it up there if you like.
Sorry, I'm taking some time to kind of turn it on. Oh, all right. Thank you very much. I'm Alina Said, and I work as the Agriculture Manager for Mallee Regional Innovation Center. And we represent the Northwest Irrigated Horticulture Node for Victorian Drought Hub. Today, I'm going to talk about the drought consultations process, how this process has worked for us, how we have utilized it following the philosophy of Victorian Drought Hub, how we have identified a few projects, and then what are certain lessons that we have learned. So a few broader aims that we had when we were doing these drought consultations were that we wanted to identify certain opportunities and priorities that can help to improve the drought resilience in the Mallee region. But not only that, we wanted a legacy and a foundation for an ongoing collaboration with those communities to enhance the drought resilience in the region. With these two broader aims, we pretty much followed on the Vic Drought Hub Innovation, Vic Drought and Innovation Hub's four-phase drought cycle explanation into how we carry these consultations. I won't go into detail because many people have covered that we follow this drought cycle of good period leading to an uncertain period when you're into drought, and then you are into recovery period. So how we have conducted this process is that Big Drought Hub at the partners have actually designed a toolkit, and that toolkit comes with a set of questions designed around each phase of this cycle. It's an ORIT template that talks about, that asks questions around the questions which are objective, interpretive, result-oriented. They talk about their interpretive, objective, and they're result-oriented as well. They talk about, for example, I can share that we asked people, what are your experiences from the last drought? What were certain things that worked for you, what that didn't work for you, what were certain gaps that you identified? And if you had like an ABC thing to do an XYZ, what is that ABC things and what are those XYZ that you're trying to achieve? So having this toolkit with us, we do the facilitated sessions with the community. We go to the community. Usually, it's an Eventbrite invite. We explain what we are trying to do, and when there is interest, and we of course touch base with many farmer organizations in the region, so we're not clashing with their events. So once people have registered, we actually bring them into a group together. On a date that is convenient for all to attend, and then it's a facilitated session. We run that session around each cycle, each phase of drought cycle, and then people actually sit together, do their brainstorming, come up with their ideas, and we actually put those ideas. Then we come back and put that into a report. We maintain our continuity of this connection and engagement with the growers. We go back to them and we share that draft report with them to make sure that we have captured what they've told us. So the continuity of this connection and engagement is important, because that's how they help you to identify projects that are of a priority that they want us to take up. And then with the same group, then we find our stakeholders who come together to co-design that project. And we bring that project, once it is co-designed, to Big Hub, and then we take it back and implement with the same stakeholders. So continuity and engagement is an important part that we try to maintain throughout the process. We have conducted the first round of consultations between 2022 and 2023. Many sessions were online because it was the COVID duration, and we have spoken with small groups, organizations, councils, statutory bodies, departments, banks, and rural financial counseling services. We have released our first report in November. Please feel free to get a copy from the table outside. This is the first drought consultation summary report, but this is not it. We have continued our second round of consultations, and this time round we are talking to the growers, to the peak industry bodies, agriculture service providers, and we have also included the health service providers, because from the first drought consultations, we had a consistent theme coming up, which was around mental health. So this time we have spoken with the health organizations in the region as well. So we have closed the conversations until June, and we are in the process of writing the report. But then we will go back to the communities again, to the stakeholders, to double check what we have captured. And once they say, yeah, here you go, and then that's where we come in and we release the report publicly. So a few projects that we identified through those first round of drought consultations are Horticulture Skills Capacity Development Framework report. That is, again, outside on the table if you would like a copy. That report actually looked at the regional skills passport, looking at different industry sectors, what were the skill demands, and in what season, what kind of skill set is needed in the region. So that is all captured in that report. That report was completed in 2022. And water allocation forecasting project. Well, this is an interesting project that came up through those drought consultations, and that was identified when we were doing those first round of consultations. This is actually a project based on the proof of concept project that was done for Goulburn River system, and it is being tested for Murray River system now. And the idea is to, this project is looking at managing drought risk through new water allocation outlooks, because when they tested it for Murray River system, it provides them with real-time stream flow forecasts, and that has reduced the uncertainty of water allocation by 50% for Goulburn Murray River system. So we are now testing it for Murray River system. The other project that we identified was blue-green algae project. Excuse me. So blue-green algae, again, we were doing these drought consultations, and water corporations came together, and they said, you know, the priority in the region is that you look at this thing, that the blue-green algae incidence and accumulation increases at the time of drought. And there are a lot of agribusinesses around in the region. And then what are certain, how to understand this accumulation phenomena, and how to put some certain strategies, kind of taking a HACCP approach to how to put in some feasibility options and look at some treatment options through this process. So the water allocation forecasting project that I mentioned before, this is the work going on with Melbourne University and MDBA. And then blue-green algae project is with Monash University, Water Research Australia, and water corporations in the region. So both these projects are underway. Identified through those people, identified as priorities by the people, and then they're coming to an end in the end of June, and currently the data analysis and report, not the report writing, but data analysis is underway. So we're still waiting on the results. It will be too early to talk about the results, but they're pretty much coming to, they will be completed very soon. Other themes that we have identified that came up as consistent themes through these consultations were form management deposits and the mental health, as I mentioned before. So what we have learned through this process is that people were talking about the drought, but within their institutions. So this is the first time we have captured the institutional memory of drought. As if you go through this report, you will find out. So people in the region were quite enthusiastic to reach out for this report, because this is the first time we have captured that institutional memory of drought. It has also increased our education in terms of horticulture sector. Not everything is on form. Both these projects are off form. So that was a learning about the sector in particular. There are certain decision-making trigger points. And around those trigger points, some data and analysis is required so that people are able to make better decisions. As I mentioned with the water allocation forecasting project, if the water allocation uncertainty is reduced by 50%, then there are important decisions that they're making. They're thinking of drying off some patches in the orchards. It may be a few patches, or it may be very many. So it minimizes the need to kind of dry off the orchards and vineyards that is happening in the region. So water allocation forecasting project would not be a subject, would not be a topic if we had not done these drought consultations in the region. So it was identified to us as a priority. We are hoping to get some new insights from blue-green algae research. There were people who were making observations, but it was sitting within each of the water corporation. But this drought consultation process actually provided them a platform to come together, share their experiences, talk about it, and then they helped us co-design this whole project. And then we were able to bring it back to the Victorian Drought Hub so that we could take it back for implementation. So we have learned a lot about the knowledge of water market mechanisms and water risk management. Not that it did not exist, but we have been able to capture it through this drought consultation process. It was existing, people were talking about it, they know everything. They told us, and it is captured in the reports. So this has been possible through this consultation process. So some other lessons that we have learned are that recovery in horticulture is not that quick. If somebody has done some stumping on the citrus orchards or They have dried off some patches and they were replanting their orchard. Recovery is not that quick. It might take 4 years to recover, to come back. And if there are consecutive periods of droughts coming up, then there are exits from farming as well. A lot of dried fruit growers had to sell their orchards, and Merbeen is is an example in the region. But there are many others who exit from the farming. And we heard in the drought consultations that you take the horticulture out of Sunraysia region, what is left there then? So, and then a few other observations, like the farming communities feel the drought first, then it moves to other sectors like transport and the agriculture service providers, and then it travels to the retail industries, but the impacts on the communities are kind of delayed. But they do happen one after the other. In the current round of consultations, we've also heard that, the schools even need to see how many children are coming to the school tours if they're happening, because there are many families who just sail and they just move away from the region. So there is some irresponsible kind of reporting, I guess, which affects tourism in the region, and there are so many people that are related with those industries, so there are effects on them. People have also told us that every drought is different. It depends on which season it happens, depends on what crop stage it is. At the time of almonds, hull splitting, maybe they don't need much water. It doesn't matter at the time of fruit ripening too. But if it is happening at the time of bud break, then it can be very harmful, and it will have long-lasting impacts. We've also heard that people want to hear more around the improved drought-tolerant varieties be introduced in the region. But another observation is that people are telling us now, bring something back to us so that, water, we can do something about the soils. How can we increase the soils' water holding capacity to be able to deal with the next drought? So these are the type of preparations that they're talking about. We find this thing in the community that they're willing to admit that, we have to prepare for the next drought. We shouldn't forget what we learned in the past, and we should be taking some innovations or making some changes to be able to deal with the next drought, or we should be resilient enough when the next drought comes in. So what is very important to me as a person coming from a background where I've always worked with the small farmers in abroad, not here, but they, when the projects are given to them from the top, we want a health project for this community. Vic Hub has not done that with us. So we go to the community and we talk to them, and the project actually stems out from them. They identify the priority, and people's willingness to share, trust, respond, and take a follow-up, like wherever they see us, they say, when is the report coming out? What are the next steps? So what happens with the water allocation forecasting project? So there are people who are actually returning these reports to me with written notes on them where they think we should be considering those aspects. There are written responses and there are emails follow-up. Retired dried fruit growers, they actually sent me emails. Oh, I forgot to say that during the conversation, but there are a few more other points to be included when you write the report. So this response is great. And a recent visit to Wurinine, for example, they wanted us, they appreciated that they were being consulted and that we reached out to them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I have to play the bad cop. We're just getting a few minutes behind, but I'd like to welcome up Sarah Healy from the Northeast Node Riverine Plains, who's going to talk about renewable energy opportunities in agriculture. Thanks, Sarah.
No worries. I'll just forward this on, shall I? All right. So I have to switch it over, do I? How's that? Can everyone hear me? That sounds much better. All right. So the question you're probably wondering is, what does renewable energy have to do with building farmers' resilience in future climate extremes. And I'd like to go back to the original intention of the Drought Hub and some of that sentiment that was bandied around when the Drought Hubs were in formation, and perhaps things that were being said about saying, well, the government doesn't want to do any more handouts in drought. This is about preventing a point where you get into an emergency and you need to do handouts. And so I think what we're trying to do with the idea of renewable energy in agriculture is actually build that resilience, not just in a farm scale, but across a community. So this quote around, it's a bit outdated now, but we've all heard it before, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So that was really the intent behind looking at renewables in agriculture, to build community resilience, but also to look at whether we could build resilience in our farming systems groups, in that sort of funding model that farming systems group rely on. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about that. We know that farming systems groups have been in existence for a long time, and they have played a really critical role in terms of identifying knowledge gaps for their region and then being able to address them. But it is no secret that farming systems groups have struggled to remain viable in certain times and certain funding environments. So they do play a critical role in terms of us building resilience in communities. And I think one of the really exciting things about the Vic Drought Hub, and not all of the farming systems groups were in the same boat, but for riverine plains, the ability to get a continuous and reasonably good income stream through the Future Drought Fund allow the ability for that organisation to grow in capacity and people and the impact that they were doing, to the point where now it can look for things to become self-sustaining. And that was really the intent behind the work around renewable energies. What if, in an ideal world, we could identify a free resource and turn that into an income stream that could not only support individual farms, farming communities, but also the farming systems groups that are there to service those groups? What if we could do that? And we know that resilience comes from having reasonably good cash reserves or diversified incomes. And that helps the individual farm or the community to fare better in extreme climates. We also, when we did our initial engagements, verified that with our members and farmers and farming communities. They did fare better if there was financial resilience. And traditionally, when we think about financial security, we think about potentially having an adult farm member getting a job off site to supplement the income, looking at mixed farming enterprises, adding livestock, or even adding in storage and other options. But we wanted to come at this from a completely different viewpoint. We know the energy market in Victoria in particular has changed. We know there's an increase in emergence of what we call green credits, or the environmental social governance freight train that is coming towards us. And so could we capitalise on these changes to look at whether there is a renewable energy model that could actually reduce our reliance as a farming system and a community on potential handouts, if you want to use that terminology? There's a lot to unpack in that no more handout statement. And so what we wanted to do was commission a study to look at whether we could use a free resource like sunshine, be it coming with a fair amount of infrastructure cost to capture it, to increase not just farmers' income, not just their communities, but potentially a not-for-profit farming systems group like Riverine Plains, allowing us more autonomy, agency to service those communities. So this study had to go through a few layers. First of all, we had to understand whether farmers, what their current level of interest was in renewable energy. And we were looking at primarily at solar. We had some sort of unintentional looks at other types of energy as well, but that was the beginning. And then we needed to look at whether it was actually possible, if farmers were interested in installing something like solar panels on unproductive land, what could they do with that energy? Was the infrastructure there to deliver it to a storage plant, into the grid, or into another facility that could use that electricity? And was the energy profile, meaning when sunshine came in, was it going to match demand from, say, a regional community if we could essentially retail or sell that energy back to a regional community? And then we wanted to look at, well, what sorts of models could do that if we were to secure a significant proportion of a membership base, like in a River Plains scenario, to install solar panels, capture energy. What sort of model could we build to then create an incentive for a farmer, like a payment back to a farmer to get a diversified income? What model could we then deliver that energy to sell it to a region to make them self-sufficient in a sense? So what are the opportunities and models there? What we found was there was a high level of motivation by farmers who were interested in the renewable energy space. In fact, we had farmers say to us, you know, if there was an opportunity for me to generate electricity, feed it into the grid or into a storage unit, and an organisation like River Plains could sell it back to the region, to other people outside of the farming community, they would even pay a slightly higher price for that than what they're currently paying for grid energy. So there's that much motivation for farmers, if they were to involve, to make a contribution back to community resilience if they could. But there are hurdles. In Victoria, currently, the electrical network or the grid has some serious constraints. In other words, a lot of people in regional Victoria already experience what are called brownouts, so periods where they can't get electricity or the electricity goes down. The actual infrastructure in Victoria is not very good. It's already at capacity. So for a bunch of farmers to put in solar panels and want to contribute to energy to that grid, there's not capacity. So this provides a fairly structural barrier. New South Wales, on the other hand, different story. It's a much better set of infrastructure, poles and wires, available for a model like that. However, there is an opportunity to create what we call local power plants or local storage units. So where you come away from the grid, you can generate electricity, put it into a local storage point, and what that could do is actually decrease the pressure on an already overloaded energy network in Victoria. In New South Wales, this is less of a problem. But what we'd also found is that actually farmers aren't that interested in electricity or reducing their electricity bills, because most farmers are actually more dependent on diesel and the cost of that than they are on electricity. That isn't always the case in irrigated systems where farmers might use electricity to drive pumps. Their bills tend to be a lot higher. So while that motivation might not be as strong, it doesn't rule out that there's an opportunity to offset that. And finally, related to the other 2 points, that while we might not be able to offset or reduce their overall energy bill, we can look at how that energy could be distributed into things like producing local hydrogen or producing local urea, which are also very high carbon footprint energy requirements. Just conscious of time, so I'm wrapping up. So what does this mean? The bad news is that we still have this structural problem in Victoria with the infrastructure. So there is a requirement for ongoing discussions around that with government to try and improve that. And that's going to benefit everyone in regional communities to get really reliable energy supplies. But what can we do locally is that we can get investment into what is called small-scale solar and battery power plants. I can't remember what the V is. Shouldn't put acronyms into a presentation. And you can just simply put, to get that happening, an expression of interest out to investors to build this infrastructure to make that happen. So that's something we could look into straight away. The opportunity here is to say, well, how can other groups, not just Red Plains or the North East, benefit from this? So we intend to make this report, and there's a lot more detail in that available to the network and to the public, so that they too can look at whether this is a viable option. And that's the end. Thank you.
Topic very close to my heart, because sustainability sits in my portfolio here at Deakin. And if you haven't seen it already, we've got 14 hectares of solar panels just behind this building over the hill there. Oh, there we go. I was going to welcome Cam back up, but he's already on the front foot. Well,
trying to save you some time.
The presentation title is Building Drought Resilience, Calculating the Impact of Climate Change on Farm Profit. Thanks, Cam.
Okay. Thanks, David. I'm going to rip through this one pretty quickly. How many people, put your hand up if you've played around with Dr. Sat? Okay, a few people have. Okay. I started in the early days when we were doing our consultation to use this as a bit of an introductory tool of what climate change and what impact might have on farm businesses and individual farmers. And we get this sort of localised information coming out of it, which you're probably familiar with because a few people put up their hands. You know, how many hot days you're going to get, how your frosts change, all of those sort of things. And if you drill into it a bit further from a climate point of view, also gives you some information around projected rainfall going forward compared to where we are now, and things like projected temperatures of where we are now. Now, I started using this with some of the farmers and I just got glazed looks because they couldn't quite translate that to two things that they're very familiar with, which is yield and which is profit. Okay, how does that in 30 years' time or 25 years' time impact my profit, impact the yields I'm going to get? So we took that challenge on. It was a project that Southern Farming Systems did, but I think it's got application not only for this drought hub, but for others as well. So we used two computer models, one called GrassGrow, which simulates pasture growth, and we also used AppSim for cropping. And we also added a third model in there, which is called At Risk. It's built into an Excel spreadsheet, and it basically does stochastic modelling. So instead of using averages, you use ranges and probabilities. And so we used the first two for production and the second one for profitability. We interviewed and built 32 individual farm models for 32 different farms through Southwest Victoria. And at 20 locations where you can see the dots there, we actually modelled crop production, animal production and pasture production as on the basis of that. And we compared two periods. One period that we called our baseline from 1990 to 2009. So we used historic climatic conditions to work out what our yield and what our farm profit would be. And then we had a future prediction of 20 years from 2020 to 2039. And for people that are into it, we used Access 1 and the representative concentration pathway of 4.5, which is what the prediction is, mid-range prediction of where our climate's going. Okay, I won't get bogged down in all of that. What do we find out of this? First of all, in many years, our production response is going to be the same. Okay, so instead of thinking climate change is going to upend us all, in a lot of cases, it's not going to matter too much to us. Some years, though, it'll be worse. And in fact, where it'll be worse is in the tight years anyway. So the tighter years are going to get tighter, okay? Which is a really important understanding, okay? What we didn't anticipate is that in some locations, because of our climatic conditions, where we're cold and wet, that in some years, we're actually going to be better. Okay? And that sort of seems a bit counterintuitive. We've got the climate change going on, we're actually going to be better off, particularly in those wetter zones and those colder zones, because a lot of our pasture growth is driven by leaf emergence driven by temperature and moisture. We're going to be warmer, okay? And we're not going to be as waterlogged and as wet. So some areas there's actually opportunity in there, but our early spring could taper off a bit. But overall, when you looked at it, it's going to be more volatile. And for us all, that means we've got to manage risk. Okay, we manage risk anyway. We're going to have to get better at managing risk because we're going to be dealing with greater volatility from year to year and from season to season. So we're going to have to be more adaptive with that. Where we did end up though, and so I'm not going to go through all the details for that for time, but where we did end up to in our conversations very quickly was about adaptation. And the adaptation that we concentrated on was not packing up the tent and moving to Tasmania, but it's what we can do in tweaks to our farm that actually build us a bit more resilience. So one of them, for example, is that if we look on the left-hand side there, and the pointer's gone missing. Oh, there it is, beautiful. If we look on the left-hand side here. Yep, there we are. Okay. In 1990, 2009, a typical Phalaris subclover pasture not far from here at Belbray, we grow 13 tonnes on average. If we put that climate change prediction over that, we're growing 10 tonnes, so we're going to lose about 21% production. But if we change the species and start growing a bit more lucerne because of the change in that climatic pattern that we're going to get, our impact is going to be 10.9 tonne as opposed to 10.3 tonne there. So just a bit of a tweak and a change of species can actually start to build a bit more resilience into it as far as the amount of loss that we may occur. The other thing is that things like soil fertility. When we did the modelling, if we didn't have optimum soil fertility, the impact would be, in this case here, about 0.8 of a tonne. But if we get our fertility right, which is just good farm management, we can basically pick up the impact of the reduction, the predicted reduction because of that climatic change, by making more use of the water we get, being more productive with the water we get. Okay, and we're not there yet. There's opportunity there. Other things, if you look at a cropping front, at the moment in our part of the world, we sow very late maturing varieties to make use of the long season that we have. With climate change, we're going to lose some production on that. So this is wheat going from 6.9 tonne on average at Cavendish near Hamilton to 6.4. But if we start putting in some mid-late maturity varieties, the impact is nowhere near as great. And so a simple tweak of, do we sow all late season or do we do some late season and some mid-late and hedge our bets, which is the way we're managing our risk, can actually reduce that influence. And the last one that we did is we looked at enterprise mix from a profitability point of view. Now, just ignore the outlier there. This is the amount of crop to livestock. So down here is it all livestock? These are all livestock businesses, and up here is all crop businesses. And what you find, which is not surprising, that the higher proportion of crop that you've got in your enterprise mix, if you've got crop and livestock, the greater the risk and the greater the potential impact, assuming we don't make some of those adaptation changes. So this also allows us to give us a bit of a tweak of how much crop and how much livestock do we run in a business. Now, approaching it this way, rather than just looking at it from a climatic point of view, had some really quite dramatic responses from the farmers. So when we did the evaluation, we said, would you consult or use the materials again? We're up around 90% that strongly agreed that, hey, this is really useful stuff that we've got. Is it relevant to drought? Yes, it was relevant to drought. And the last one, which I think was the most important one, and I've had people follow up with me, is, are you likely to consider or make a change in your practice? So I reckon what we've hit on here is something that's really useful to take the climatic stuff that we talk about, that sometimes farmers have a little bit of trouble trying to get in a tangible sort of understanding, and putting that into something that they really understand, which is around yield and profit. Okay? And simply by doing that, we're now having those conversations about how we start managing that risk. And that's it, David.
Thanks, Graham. We do have a few minutes for questions for all the speakers from this session. I'm going to open it right up. So if there are any questions in the room, please just raise your hand and George, bring a microphone over to you. Thanks. Yeah, Peter, thanks. Just let the speaker know who you're directing it to.
Yeah. Yep. Well, to Cam probably. You said a lot of things today, Cam, that I agree very passionately with. So that's very good. In your previous talk, you were saying about how we need to turn data into more decision support type things, which I strongly agree with. And in this last talk, you're talking about modelling your decision support, and you mentioned, because people understand yield profit, and of course, it immediately made me think of, yield profit, the model that PCG run using APSM. And it seems like what you're doing there is very similar to what they've been pushing for years. I've been a a great enthusiast for that approach that they've been doing in BCG, although I'm not sure how well the uptake has been, but it seems to me that you're dead right. What people will need to do is be managing risk in the future. If they really want to make profits, they're going to have to make big profits on those other years because they're going to make bigger losses on those others. What do you think, I suppose my question is, about really the uptake and spread of, the yield profit model with farmers?
Yeah. Things like the yield profit. Do they? Oh, no, sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I've come to the conclusion now that there is a disconnect between running models and generating data and then helping people process that data. Okay. And as I said, just flippantly, I think it's the Achilles heel in agriculture. We're not short of information, we're not short of data. What we haven't done is we haven't taught people how to make a good decision. Decision making is a skill. You can learn it, you can practice it, you can get better. No different to any sport, no different to reading and writing and doing maths. We've had, from little kids to university level, we learn how to read and we get better and better. Okay? But decision making, we just assume because you make a decision, you know how to do it and make good ones. And it is just a fallacy. When I've been doing this stuff of talking about decision making processes, people really warm to being taught a process. Jane may want to comment on that because we did 12 trigger point workshops around the containment feeding stuff. And we basically just showed a simple process of how do you decide when you put animals into a containment area or not. It wasn't the answer at the end, it was the process that people went through that they said, that was fantastic. Because now I've got data, yeah, I can look at ground cover, I can measure condition score on animals, I can collect all that data, but how do I process it to make a good decision that's right for me? So I think that's where we're really falling down, okay? And quite often we, at the moment, let technology drive it. This is a good bit of tech. We'll use that bit of tech because this will help us make better decisions. If you don't have a process to do that, why get the tech? Well, we've cut out about half the tech we farm at home now because it doesn't help our decision making, because we've worked out what do we need to make a good decision. Oh, don't need that, we get rid of it. Otherwise it's just confusing us.
We've got a question at the back.
Yep, Rob Shea, Perennial Pasture Systems, ARAC. Cam, you probably just answered that. You probably could say the same thing again. But farmers making decisions and trusting data. Last year in our part of the world, the Bureau's El Nino waffle and then prediction, and the nightly news talking of El Nino, and that while people were experiencing a great autumn and winter, weighed heavily on people's psychology and possibly led to some bad decisions being made, which puts less money in the bank and makes people less resilient. How as an industry, do we overcome the media?
How do we overcome the media? God,
and the bomb predictions and the weekly times to get a headline and
but
psychology.
So, but that's playing into the same thing that I'm talking about. That if anybody made a decision based on the headline in the Orange comic, which is the Weekly Times, or what they heard as a headline from the Bureau, they're nuts.
It was more than psychology, but
but if you'd thought through, if you'd had the process, because we heard exactly the same thing at home, but we didn't stop doing what we were doing. What's that? Sorry, I didn't hear that,
Rob. It
Rob.
never stops raining where you are.
I live on the Bellarine, so we've had no rain for a few months.
We've been kissed this year, I can tell you. We've had a great autumn this year. But it was the process, because we're actually selling livestock and people stopped buying livestock in a sale that we had. And when we rang them up, they said, oh, we're going into drought. How did you come to the conclusion we're going into drought? Oh, because the Bureau just said. It's not actually what they said. If you'd been taught the process and you had the right sort of tick off things in place, you would have said, oh, hang on, we're not actually going into drought. This is a bit of a beat up. Okay. And I had lots of individual clients that we talked that through. And they made much better decisions than the knee-jerk one based on the headline. That's about a process of decision-making. okay, and understanding what information is valuable, and even that information in the context of other things, and making a decision on balance, because you've got to consider this, 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 and this as well, not just that one thing, is the process bit, Rob. And when you're comfortable with that, then all this other stuff that you hear, you put into context.
Well, I might close it off there because we are running into lunch. We've got an hour for lunch, so that gives people plenty of time to socialise, to talk with all of our speakers. So can I just thank all the presenters from this last session? As you can see, there's a lot of presentations in a short space of time. I think the theme will continue this afternoon. So, so I appreciate your patience in us moving through them all. I look forward to seeing everybody back here after lunch. We're starting at 2 o'clock, so if you could come back a few minutes early, and I'll do my best not to get distracted in the conversation and be late as well. Thanks, everyone. See you after lunch.
We live in Queenstown farm. Yeah, so where are you? Oh, okay. So we're on Murray-Dock Park. So we're roundabout is close to Port Arthur and Drought. So once you go down there, we're on both sides of the road. Yeah, so